Welcome back, folks, to continue in this study of the book of Revelation. We had left off last week around verse 6 of chapter 8, where we're starting to look at the trumpet judgments. We had noticed that the first part of this chapter concluded with the last part of the previous chapter had to do with a temple service and the way things were conducted in the temple. We looked at how the golden censer had fit in to their service, and how the altar of incense, how the incense itself, and the priests, their duty in part. We didn't look at it in total. We just looked at it at bits and pieces. Mainly what concerns this passage of scripture that we're looking at here. And strictly for the purpose of identifying this as a temple service. We looked at how it was interesting that this could be a temple service and God is pronouncing judgment on those that are supposed to be his people. We looked at several passages that concern judgment as part of a sacrifice, a temple sacrifice. For instance, we looked at Ezekiel chapter 10, verses 1 and 2. We looked at Isaiah 26, verses 5 through 11. We looked at Psalm 37:20, Isaiah 34:6, Jeremiah 51:4, and so on and so forth. You get the idea if you remember. And for those that would like it, I have a copy of these notes that I put together for my own purpose, for my own reasons, for my own study. Just information that I've gathered up for my purpose, and you may be interested in reading them and studying them and adding to or taking from them. They're available. All you have to do is just let me know, and I'll send you a copy of them. Criticize them, uh, add things to them. Give me some more material to work with. But please, let's be biblical about this. I'm not crazy about all the extra biblical writings like what they call the early church fathers, or what some call the patristics. I'm not crazy about all the things that they have to say. I am interested in other Jewish writings that had to do with things such as the temple service, uh, things that concern the scapegoat, and so on and so forth. There's things out of the Mishnah, things out of the oral teaching, the rabbinical teaching. I read those every chance I get, and as many as I can get my hands on, because whether people like to admit it or not, this literature that we have that's called the Bible is mainly Jewish. It had to communicate to a people that God had selected for his own purpose, his own glory, and they they were what we call Jewish. They were Israelites. They had customs, and most of their customs and culture was formulated by God himself. We've noticed that looking through the uh, festival days, and just in part and parcel looking at some of the things that some of these authors like Lightfoot has, several other, mind is blank right now, but I've got several other resources that I go to check to see the guy that authored the life and times of Jesus the Messiah, and just whatever I can get my hands on, just to better understand their culture, their lifestyle, the way, the manner and order in which they did things, so that it helps us to understand what we're reading in our Bibles quite a bit clearer. Now, I know people out there are going to be saying, oh, no, this is inspired of God. This is God's writings. This ain't some Jewish Israelite writing. We need to understand, first and foremost, that God communicated to those people. And the way that he communicated to them can be understood today with a little bit of help. The idioms, the figures of speech, the things that pertain to their lifestyle. They were an agricultural people. They understood things or examples given in an agricultural manner. You know, Jesus, most of the parables had to do with agriculture, their way of life. We ought not to think that, especially the New Testament's written in some kind of vacuum that has nothing at all to do with the Old Testament. It's foolishness. When every writer, including Christ himself, spoke, commented, alluded to, even in part, and in full, passages from the Old Testament, the prophets, and the law, and the Psalms. There's no reason for us to think that the New Testament writers come along with some whole new revelation. No, this is this was revealed to the prophets, as Peter says, 1 Peter 1, verse 10 through 12. Also, the same pertains to this book of Revelation, so that we can understand it if we just search the scriptures like Jesus said. He said, "These are they which testify of me." Those Jews thought that with the oracles of God, they had eternal life. And since they were born a Jew, you know, we be not born of fornication, as they were fond of saying. Jesus would correct them on that. John the Baptist would correct them on it. But let's get into Revelation 8. As I was saying, we had seen how this was a type of temple service that was taking place. And I did say what I found interesting is in verse 4, the smoke of the incense, which came up with the prayers of the saints, ascended up before God out of the angel's hand. See that? See how that's worded? Out of the angel's hand. But the censer, the fire pan, was not. Let me do something here. I do this all the time. There we go. Out of the angel's hand. The censer itself was down here. It, it's not being used for the purpose in which it was supposed to be used. To put the coals on and then drop the incense on the coals so it would cause the smoke to fill the Holy of Holies. No, the censer is, I guess, in the angel's other hand, because you've got out of the angel's hand goes the incense, the smoke of the incense, and then you've got this censer, and he takes it to the altar, fills it with coals of fire, and then he casts it into the earth. We had looked in Ezekiel chapter 10 to relate this to what John was seeing. Now Ezekiel saw the same thing. Look at this. Then I looked, and behold, a firmament that was above the head of the cherubims. There appeared over them, as it were, a sapphire stone, as the appearance of the likeness of a throne. Is this not what John is seeing in the book of Revelation? And he spake unto the man clothed in linen, said, Go in between the wheels under the cherub, and fill thine hand with the coals of fire from between the cherubim. If you look in Isaiah, I believe it's 37, God dwells between the cherubim. Let me look that up real quick, because I don't want to leave you hanging on that. We were studying through that this morning, the account of Rabshakeh and Sennacherib hurling insults at the Most High God, and Hezekiah starting to fear. So he approaches Isaiah, and Isaiah intercedes between him and the Lord, and he tells Hezekiah what the Lord's word was concerning this Sennacherib. But Isaiah 37:14. Hezekiah received a letter from the hand of the messengers and read it. This is a letter from Rabshakeh, yeah, or from Sennacherib, that's saying that Sennacherib's pretty much saying, I don't care who your God is, I'm going to destroy you, and none of these other gods have been able to stand up against me. Hezekiah went up in the house of the Lord and spread the letter, before the Lord. And Hezekiah prayed unto the Lord, saying, O Lord of hosts, God of Israel, that dwellest between the cherubim. That's just one of the many references to where God's throne is. So you got this appearance of a throne in Ezekiel 10. Then you've got the cherubim over them is a sapphire stone and the appearance of the likeness of a throne. This is exactly what John was seeing in earlier chapters of Revelation. So he speaks with the man clothed with linen, a priest, possibly high priest. He said, go in between the wheels, under the cherub, fill thine hand with coals of fire. What do we have in Revelation 8? We have coals of fire at the altar. From between the cherubim. That tells me that fire is from God. If God dwells between the cherubim, that is where that fire is from. This is not an arbitrary matter. This is God sending judgment. And scattered them over the city, and he went in my sight. Ezekiel got to see him go in. So in Revelation 8, verse 5, we have the same thing taking place. Takes that fire from the altar, fire of God, cast it into the earth. I know Ezekiel says he scattered it over the city. This is what we have taking place. It's that Greek word G, where you get our word, English word, geography from that word. And it just means a region or solid part, the whole of the earthly globe. It means land in this passage. It means land. It was talking about the land of Judah. There were voices, thunderings, lightnings, and earthquake. And I'd said that's God's signature right there. That's what you have. That's what they seen when they were at the Mount Sinai. That's what uh, Elijah saw in 1 Kings 19, verse 11, I believe it was, when he was running from Jezebel. Imagine that. Running from a Jezebel, the Jezebel, and Ahab. And he runs all the way down to the south of Judah. And he is waiting on the Lord to answer him. And lo and behold, the Lord sends these things right before his face. And the Lord wasn't in any of them, but it was a voice, a peaceful, low tone voice, a still small voice. God was in that voice speaking to Elijah. Now, Elijah having his Elijah complex, as we like to call it. Uh, several, no, many places throughout the prophets, you're going to find two, maybe even three of these. You might not find the word voices, but you're going to find these other three here mentioned in context with God's judgment. So let's move on to verse 6 so we don't take up too much time in review. An angel, I'm sorry, and the seven angels which had the seven trumpets prepared themselves to sound. The first angel sounded, and there followed hail and fire, mingled with blood. They were cast upon the earth. The third part of the trees was burned up, and all green grass was burned up. And the second angel sounded, and as it were, a great mountain burning with fire was cast in the sea, and the third part of the sea became blood. The third part of the creatures which were in the sea and had life died. The third part of the ships were destroyed. The third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp, and it fell upon the third part of the rivers and upon the fountains of waters. And the name of the star is called Wormwood. And the third part of the waters became wormwood, which simply means bitter. And many men died of the waters because they were made bitter. The fourth angel sounded, and the third part of the sun was split, and the third part of the moon, and the third part of the stars. So the third part of them was darkened, and the day shone not for a third part of it, and the night likewise. And I beheld and heard, An angel flying through the midst of heaven, saying with a loud voice, "Woe, woe, woe." He's not telling them to stop. He's pronouncing woes upon them. To the inhabitants of the earth by reason of the other voices of the trumpet of the three angels which are yet to sound. So we're going to jump over here and we're going to look at our outline. Now, this is by no means exhaustive. This is simply things that I have put together that I found interesting and I believe have everything in the world to do with what we're seeing in Revelation. Uh, Simply what you have throughout all these judgments, these trumpet judgments, and the most simplest way that I could put it is the land is being judged. That is the people. The people are being judged for their arrogance. Each and every one of these judgments, and these trumpets, well, with the first four at least, can be traced back through phrases, through the phraseology being used in the judgments, can be traced back to an Old Testament passage that had to do with an arrogant, pompous leader or even leadership. These folks thought they had it all figured out, had it all, they're higher than God. We're going to look at a few of them as we go. But first, in verse 6, the seven angels which had seven trumpets prepared themselves to sound. I had noted, we had said that this is a temple service. You've got these trumpets given. The trumpets, according to Numbers 10, were to be blown over the sacrifices during their worship service. Be blown during the new month, the new moon. Uh, was to be blown during the year of Jubilee, which always fell on the 10th of Tishrei, the seventh month in their calendar, religious calendar, first month in their civil calendar. It was the Rosh Hashanah is the head of the new year, as I was explaining last week. And so you've got seven of them, seven priests, and I showed how the priests coincide with the angels. You have angels here in Revelation. You go back and you look in the passages that correspond to the ministers with the trumpets. It's priests mentioned there. I won't go back over that because, like I said, we'll get too crazy with the review. What we're going to look at is Joshua chapter 6, verses 1 through 27. We're going to see how it corresponds to what's taking place here. Let's go back to not there. Let's go back. This one, Bobby. Let's go back to this, and we're going to go to Joshua chapter 6, where it is written, Jericho was straightly shut up because of the children of Israel. None went out, none came in. The Lord said, Joshua, see, I have given into thine hand Jericho. Something I want to point out. This is the God who calls those things that be not as though they are. This is God who says, I have already given it into your hand. Yet they didn't possess a thing that belonged to Jericho, except for whatever they took out of Rahab's house. They didn't have any of it, but they did have it. God had already given it to them. All they had to do was respond to his instruction. They responded in obedience to his instruction. Now, here's God telling them, Joshua, look, I have given you this entire place, the king himself, the mighty men of valor, and the whole city. You're going to compass the city, all you men of war, go around about the city once. You're going to do this 6 days. 7 priests shall bear before the ark 7 trumpets of ram's horns. And the 7th day you shall compass the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow with the trumpets. And this shall come to pass when they make a long blast with the ram's horn. This is significant. This long blast with the ram's horn. Excuse me. That was an alarm. You look at Numbers 10, you're going to find out that's an alarm. I don't want to spend too much time on this because I want to draw this out like crazy if I don't, if I spend too much time on this. But the long blast is also consequent with the last trump. Uh, oh, I've opened my mouth. I'm going to have to go show you because now you're going to be curious, and I totally understand because I was when I first heard about it. All right, now I've got this in my notes over here. Here we go. In the seventh month, first day of the month, ye shall have a Sabbath, a memorial of blowing the trumpets, a holy convocation. You shall do no servile work therein, but you shall offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord. You look over here in our notes. This is what I found concerning that very day, that first day. I'll go back here because it's not so strode out. When they blew the trumpets on the first day, what they called Yom Teruah, it was the Festival of Trumpets. That was the day of blowing the trumpet. And as I said, on the 10th of the same month, which was the Day of Atonement, that is which Leviticus 25 tells us that that's the same day that the Jubilee, the 50-year Jubilee, fell on every 50 years. Interesting, huh? Yeah. Acceptable day of the Lord, as Jesus called it in Luke 4. All right. This is how it works. They start out with a long single blast. Now, don't get that confused with what we've seen already in Joshua chapter 6. A long single blast. It was straight, plain, smooth, continuous note, and it is to symbolize the expression of joy and contentment. The Shavarim, or Shavarim, is three short blasts and a combination of three broken notes to symbolize weeping. The Trua, this is the Teruah, Yom Teruah, Day of Trumpets. Extremely short blasts, which are a combination of nine staccato notes in a very quick session of short trill. This symbolized trepidation, sorrow, and sobbing. Usually, no, I won't get into that. I won't get into that. Okay, then you have at last the Tekaya Gadola, which means the last trump. This one symbolizes the hope of redemption. It was very long final note. Now I noted this down here in these 100 blasts. The first of three categories are combined back and forth until there is a total of 99 sounds. The significance of that 99 is, or the 100 is interesting because of how Jesus uses the number 100 for the sheep. But anyway, then comes the 100th, the Tekaya Gadola, a very long sustained note as long as the trumpeter had breath to hold it. And this is known as the last trump. Okay, I did it. There. Now we can go back to Joshua chapter 6. So this ain't too long. When you make a long blast with the ram's horn, that's that Tekaya Gadola. That is the last trump. When you hear the sound of the trumpet, and all the people shall shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city shall fall down flat, and the people shall stand up every man straightway before him. Joshua called the priest, gives them the instruction. It comes to pass. Down here on the seventh day, they rose about the dawning of the day, compassed the city after the same manner 7 times. Only on that day they compassed the city 7 times. And it came to pass at the seventh time that the priests blew with the trumpets, and Joshua said unto the people, Shout, for the Lord hath given you the city. Now I'd like to take this time to say that it's interesting to entertain the notion that these folks would not have gained anything from this city and will not have succeeded in this battle had they not heeded the Lord's instruction. God gave them the formula on how to take the city because he had given it to them already. And he says, now this is what you're going to do. I, I don't know about y'all. I'm all ears. I'm all ears. He says, this is what you're going to do. I'm all ears. I'm all in. You just tell me what it is. And we'll do it. Well, some religious people today seem to think, oh, no, that's not really what you meant, is it, Lord? So these folks are told to walk around the city once a day, 6 days. On the seventh day, you walk around 7 times. And on the seventh round, blow the trumpets. Everybody shouts. The walls fall down smooth. And that's what took place. All they had to do was obey, listen and obey. And they did that. Now, just to entertain the notion, if they hadn't have done it, would the walls of Jericho fallen? I highly doubt it. God gave them an instruction. Did they doubt the instruction? Did they question God? Well, now, God, Yahweh, there's got to be some better way to do this. I mean, really, Lord, seriously? Go march around the city? Blow on the trumpets? Everybody yells as loud as and as long as they can? Really? What's that going to do? Nobody questioned him. And if they did, it's not recorded. But they did exactly as they were told. And they had the victory. The Lord gave them the victory. So what do you have taking place here? Well, in the previous chapter, you have the account of the harlot Rahab, who receives the spies, who had received the spies. Not in the previous chapter, I'm sorry. That's previous chapter, Joshua chapter 5 is where they enter into the promised land. But latter chapters of Deuteronomy, Numbers, you have taking place the spies that go in to the promised land to spy it out. All 12 of them. 10 of them come back with a bad report. Say, these people are like giants. There are giants in the land. We're like grasshoppers in their sight. We're not taking the place. Forget it. So they convinced the people because the only two of 12 total, Joshua and Caleb, came back with a good report. And you know what they said? They said it's exactly as the Lord declared. We can take it because the Lord declared what's in it, and what he said is there is there. Therefore, if he said we can take it, we can take it. That's faith. That's faith in action. Faith, by the way, pistos is a Greek verb. It's an action word. So they by faith, as the writer of Hebrews tells us, the walls of Jericho fell. So what do you have taking place here? You have a mark being placed upon Rahab in her house, and all that would be delivered with her. What was that mark? Was it not the scarlet thread they told her to mark her home with, and to have everybody that was interested in fleeing the destruction and the carnage to be gathered in her house? Ain't that a picture of the church? She has a mark. What did we see in Revelation 7 and also Ezekiel 9? We see a mark. People that sign, cry for the abominations that are done in the city are being marked. You have the same place taking place, same thing taking place. I'm getting ahead of myself in Joshua chapter 6. Why is this? Because it's types and shadows. These are written specifically to back up the things that were going to take place in the first century. All right. They followed the Lord's instruction, then the city falls, and then lo and behold, uh, Israel's able to go in and receive all of the spoil. What a beautiful picture. The ones that were saved were the ones, the Gentiles, that were marked. They were marked in Rahab's house. But with the sound of the trumpets, the great trump, the last trump, and the shout, dare I say, voice of an archangel, the walls of Jericho fell. Huh. Interesting how that works. How it all just kind of lines up, fits like a hand in a glove. All right, you may want to look further along in the book of Revelation to Revelation 10 and verse 7. In the days of the voice of the seventh angel. This is the sound of the seventh trump, the last trump, the last trumpet. When he shall begin to sound, the mystery of God shall be finished, as he hath declared to his servants the prophets. What mystery? The mystery kept secret since the foundation of the world, maybe? that the Gentiles would be fellow heirs with the saints in one body? Huh, it's an interesting mystery. No longer a mystery because it's been revealed to us by his word. Paul said in Ephesians 3 and verse 7, whereby when you read, you may understand my knowledge in the mystery of God. This is a mystery being finished, being completed. I put also Revelation 11 and verse 15, which is the record of the seventh trump taking place. The seventh angel sounded. And we'll get to that when we get to that. But you're going to notice that these trumpet judgments are almost directly parallel with the vial, the bowl judgments. I didn't place them side by side. What we're going to do is we're going to look at these in general. And when we get to the seven vial judgments, seven bowl judgments, we'll do some notes and compare. I'll have to write that down because if I don't, I'll forget. But if I do my part, when we get to those vial judgments, then we'll see how they coincide with one another. All right, moving on to verse 8. Let's go ahead and maximize our note section, shall we? Then the first angel sounded. There followed hail and fire mingled with blood, and they were cast upon the earth. The third part of the trees was burned up, and all green grass was burned up. The third part, you have an example in Ezekiel chapter 5 that this is judgment, obviously, where Ezekiel, let's go there, shall we? Let's go to Ezekiel. Ezekiel chapter 5, that's what I'm talking about. Where God says to Ezekiel, he says, thou son of man, take this sharp knife, the barber's razor, and cause it to pass upon thine head and upon thine beard. Then take the balances to weigh, and divide the hair. Thou shalt burn with fire a third part in the midst of the city. And when the days of the siege are fulfilled, thou shalt take a third part and smite it about with a knife. And a third part shall thou scatter in the wind, and I'll draw a sword out after them. Thou shalt also take thereof a few in number, and bind them in thy skirts. That is a very interesting passage right there. He's the Son of Man, and they're supposed to be bound in his skirts, aka clothed with the Son of Man. Anyway, then take of them again and cast them in the midst of the fire and burn them in the fire. Therefore shall a fire come forth into the house of all Israel. Now, you see what I'm talking about? Fire being a judgment of God. This is what we have taking place in Revelation chapter 8. The same exact thing. God's judgment taking place. And that third part, as we're going to see throughout these first four, has to do with judgment. Uh, God says, I'm going to, yeah, you may also check, was it Hosea 13:8? Well, I'm going to bring a third part through the fire, and I'm going to refine them as silver is and gold is refined. And they shall be mine, I shall be their God, and they shall be my people. Boy, what a beautiful promise that is. You and I are living that promise, folks. Hail and fire, he says. Look at Psalm 18:13. The Lord also thundered in the heavens, and the highest gave his voice. Hail, coals of fire. Well, now looky there. What do we have from verse 5? Huh. Voices, thunderings, lightnings, earthquake. The Lord gave his voice. There was uh, thundering. There was hail, coals of fire. Huh. Joel chapter 2, verses 28 through 32. Peter repeats this prophecy and says, this is being fulfilled today in your sight. It shall come to pass afterward, Peter says that's the last days, I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and daughters shall prophesy, your old men shall dream dreams, your young men shall see visions. And also upon the servants and upon the handmaids in those days will I pour out of my spirit. And I will show wonders in the heavens and the earth, and blood and fire, pillars of smoke. Sun shall be turned into darkness, the moon into blood, for that great and terrible day of the Lord come. So you see the blood, you see the hail, you see the fire, You see these things taking place from Joel's prophecy. You also see the sun being turned into darkness, the moon into blood, which has to do with another trumpet sound, the fourth trumpet. It shall come to pass that whosoever shall call on the name of the Lord shall be saved. For in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem shall be deliverance, as the Lord has said, and in the remnant whom the Lord shall call. John mentions trees and green grass here. Well, we look back to Exodus. This kind of reminds us of when the Lord hailed on Egypt, only the land of Goshen, where the Israelites dwelt. They were just the children of Israel back then, but where they dwelt, it was only safe place from the hail. And so it was mingled with fire. Hail mingled with fire. Very grievous, and as such as there was none like it in all the land of Egypt since it became a nation. So I noted that this plague itself was the vegetation, the fruit of the field. And as we move on through these, there's a progression there. Let's go back to our study. The second angel sounded, and as it were, a great mountain burning with fire was cast into the sea, and the third part of the sea became blood. The third part of the creatures which were in the sea had life, died. The third part of the ships were destroyed. Mountain burning. Like I said, and earlier on, this is Yahweh's judgment. That third part identifies it as Yahweh's judgment, as we've seen in Ezekiel 5. Okay, this burning mountain is Yahweh's signature again. Look at Deuteronomy 5, 22 and 23. These words the Lord spake unto all your assembly in the mount out of the midst of the fires. Moses recalling what took place at Mount Sinai. Of the cloud and of the thick darkness and with great voice. And he added no more. And he wrote them in 2 tables of stones and delivered them unto me. Interesting. Moses says he added no more. What was Jesus condemning the Pharisees in Matthew 23 for? Adding and taking away, huh? All right. God wanted more, he had added more. And it came to pass when ye heard the voice out of the midst of the darkness, for the mountain did burn with fire, that you came near unto me, and the heads of your tribes and your elders. It's just one example. There's many examples that is spoken of. For instance, in Hebrews 12, that mountain that burned with fire. That burning mountain was God's exhibition right there in the eyes of the people. And they were so scared, they said, please, please, no, 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 don't let him speak to us no more. Because that trumpet drew on and on and on, and the sound of that trumpet was so loud and reverberating. The seed of blood, it may remind you of another plague in Egypt. The waters turned to blood in Exodus chapter 7. The ships destroyed. That reminded me of Ezekiel 26 through 28, the chapters 26 through 28. Tyre was judged for its pride. And in the latter part of chapter 28, Sidon is judged for the same. So that plague attacks their commerce. We're going to see that concept all throughout the book of Revelation. You go back and you see where ships are involved. It has to do. You look in Isaiah 2 on the ships of Tarshish, the pleasant sloops. Well, King James says pleasant pictures, but it has to do with the faster hotshot ships, as I like to call them. But you read, just simply read Ezekiel 26 through 28, you're going to see Tyre and later on Sidon were guilty of ridiculous pride and arrogance. They thought they were, they exalted themselves higher than God. The same thing that Lucifer, the son of the morning, in Isaiah 14 was guilty of. The same thing that Tyre was guilty of. You'll see that. Uh, And when you read, just read Ezekiel 26 through 28. But those ships supplied a lot of commerce for this land that God is pronouncing judgment upon. You'll see that all throughout those three chapters right there, and you're going to see it again in the book of Revelation as we move on. So the third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning, as it were a lamp. And it fell upon the third part of the rivers and upon the fountains of waters. And the name of the star is called Wormwood. The third part of the waters became wormwood. Many men died because of the waters, or of the waters, because they were made bitter. That star burning as a lamp from heaven. This is God sending the judgment. I know there's a lot of people make a big deal out of this wormwood and how it's like a star that fell from heaven, and how Jesus said he beheld Satan fall from heaven. And like I mentioned earlier, Isaiah 14. You know that's fine. Uh, that's fine. I even put it in the notes. Isaiah 14:12. This is what some say. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? Art thou cut down to the ground, which did weaken the nations? That's against the king of Babylon by reason of pride. That was the whole purpose of that part of the chapter, was their pride and arrogance, and they were going to be cut down, cast down. That king was going to be cast down. Now, if this was prophesying of Nebuchadnezzar, boy, howdy did it happen. Go and read Daniel chapters 2 through 4. Or is it chapter 5? I get them, I may be short on my reference there. Go and read the account of Nebuchadnezzar. His nails grew long, his hair grew, his beard grew, and he ate the grass of the field, and the dew of the heavens landed on his back, and so on and so forth. He was humbled. The water made bitter. You look at Jeremiah 9, verse 15. Therefore, thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, behold, I will feed them, even this people, with wormwood, and give them water of gall to drink. He says essentially the same thing in chapter 23 and verse 15 of Jeremiah. So this plague was upon the waters. So what do we have here? We got fruit of the field, commerce, now the waters being struck. All right, let's keep on moving. Fourth angel sounded, third part of the sun was smitten, third part of the moon, third part of the stars. So as the third part of them was darkened, and the day shone not for a third part of it, and the night likewise. How is it that the night does not shine for a third part of it? Well, obviously this is speaking of the moon and the stars for a third part of the night. That gets confusing if you're not quite sure what's getting mentioned here. But that darkening of the sun, moon, and stars oftentimes in Scripture has to do. If you look in Isaiah 13, a prophecy against Babylon. Lo and behold, a prophecy against Babylon. Imagine that. Uh, in the book of Revelation. Uh, this Isaiah was speaking of the destruction of Babylon. And in that destruction, the stars of the heaven and constellations shall not give their light. The sun shall be darkened, the moon shall not cause her light to shine. You read in some literature that those sun, moon, and stars even were a reference to the leadership, the higher ups of the nation, of a government. I believe it's Genesis 37, where Joseph dreams a dream, and his mama and daddy are his daddy Jacob is the sun, and his mama is the Rachel is the moon, and his brethren are 11 stars. I put in here that this would remind us of Egypt, the thick darkness, darkness that may be even felt. Uh, Exodus 10, verse 21, verse 23, through verse 23. The signs, you look in Luke 21:25. There shall be signs in the sun, and in the moon, and the stars, and upon the earth, distress of nations, with perplexity, and the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear. of the things that were coming upon the earth. Luke goes on, or Jesus goes on to say there. Jesus said there was going to be days like this. So this plague, 1/3 darkness. That's what I put just to keep in line with the text. Essentially what it is the plague of darkness. You have the day being cut short and the night being cut short, so on and so forth. Because what defined the day? The sun. What defined the night? The moon and stars. These were signs for signs and seasons. And even festivals. Genesis chapter 8. I beheld, verse 13, and an angel flying through the midst of heaven saying with a loud voice, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like I said earlier, that's not him telling them to stop, even though that's what they should do. To the inhabitants of the earth, by reason of the other voices, the sounds of the trumpet of the three angels which are not yet sound, which are yet to sound. That proclamation of three more woes upon the inhabitants of the earth. That's a phrase that we're going to be watching for. Inhabitants of the earth. Now that's a distinct from the dwellers in heaven. Look at Revelation 12 and verse 12. Therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knoweth he hath but a short time. Wow, 1950 some odd years ago, he had a short time. Nevertheless, there's a distinction between those two phrases, inhabitants of earth and the dwellers in heaven. Heavens, ye that dwell in them, and the inhabitants of the earth. The earth and all that dwell therein is the way that it's worded in some places, but that's distinctive. And I don't believe this is talking about people who had died of physical death and long since gone on and were living in the heavenly realm and in God's throne room. He's there. Heaven is my throne and the earth is my footstool. But no, these folks were alive and well just as much as the inhabitants of the earth. The dwellers in heaven were the Christians. They were the believers in the Messiah. They were partakers of the heavenly realm. You know, uh, what is that? God has, the Lord Jesus Christ, who has blessed us with all spiritual blessings in heavenly places. There's your dwellers in heaven. Those who had obeyed the gospel. The inhabitants of earth, those who disobeyed or could care less about the gospel, the good news. They're, they have three woes pronounced upon them because they're the ones that are the target of God's judgment, not the Christians, not the dwellers in heaven. We are the target of persecution, not God's judgments. So this goofy idea running around in the Church of Christ these days, and others, that says every knee shall bow and every tongue shall confess, has no idea what they're talking about. Yeah, I said it. And I'll be glad to talk to anybody about it. I'm going to show you why. Isaiah 45 and verse 23. I have sworn by myself, the word is gone out of my mouth in righteousness. It shall not return, that unto me every knee shall bow and every tongue shall swear. Let's do this right here. We're going to look at a few references in our New Testaments. If this reference system has it, it might not. Yeah. As I live, Romans 14, verse 11. It is written, as I live, saith the Lord, every knee shall bow to me and every tongue shall confess to God. And also in Philippians 2 and verse 10. What do you mean? We shall all give an account before God. So then every one of us shall give an account of God to himself, of himself to God. Wow, I messed that up. I got indigestion. I apologize. Yeah, you know, I hate to tell y'all my problems, but Last week I had sinus allergy, whatever it was, problems. This week I've got this. Uh, you know what? Forget I said anything. No complaining. Uh, as I live, this was a prophecy that was going to have its fulfillment in that first century at the destruction of Jerusalem. Now, why do I say that? Because it was the same time that the remnant were going to be joined under the Lord, the remnant and uh, scattered, the scattered remnant, the strangers in Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Bithynia, that that Peter writes specifically to in two letters, and James writes specifically to in one letter. Every knee was going to bow and every tongue shall confess to God. Surely one shall say, Isaiah goes on, in the Lord I have a righteousness and strength. Even to him shall men come, and all that are incensed against him shall be ashamed. See the judgment right there? Men are going to come to him for righteousness' sake. But those that are incensed against him, they have their nostrils flaring again. They can't stand him. They're blazing anger against him shall be ashamed. In the Lord shall all the seed of Israel be justified. Now there's your quotation that is carried forth in the New Testament. Romans 3 and verse 25, I believe it is. Nope. So this is why I don't. This is what happens when I don't prepare beforehand. There are several places it's quoted, part and parcel. By this shall all Israel be saved. That's Romans 11, 25 through 27. And so then all Israel shall be saved. All the seed of Israel shall be justified. Paul would explain in Romans 2 and Romans 9 that all Israel is not Israel. Even though you seed of Abraham, you still could not be Israel. But he informs us in Galatians 3, verse 27 through 29, are Abraham's seed and true Israel. For as many of you as have been baptized into Christ have put on Christ. There's neither Jew nor Greek, no bond nor free. There's no male nor female. You're all one in Christ Jesus. No, that's not talking about transgenderism. And if you be Christ, then are ye Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. As far as salvation is distinct, there's no difference between male and female, as far as salvation is concerned. That's exactly what that means. Women still have their roles in the church, men have their roles. What's so hard about this to obey and understand? I digress. This is in the context of all Israel being saved. Every knee. Now, does that mean every knee on the planet? It sure don't. It sure don't. Gentiles didn't bow the knee to him unless they obeyed the gospel. Every knee of Israel. This was going to be a judgment upon that wicked nation for the last time. They were going to be judged, and that's it. They had turned into a wicked nation. The remnant was going to be plucked up out of that wicked nation into Christ, and in Christ shall they be justified. That's how all Israel was going to be justified. So just to give a brief explanation of what I was saying about this, every knee shall bow and every tongue shall confess. That's I did it. I did it. I know people do it today. I hear them arguing with me all the time about it. That you're taking it out of context. You're plucking it right out of the context that God put it in through the prophet Isaiah. And you're giving something, ascribing something to it that is totally not there. Israel, all Israel was going to be saved. And the way they were going to be saved, Romans 11, 25 through 27, was going to be in the Messiah. So all Israel shall be saved, as it is written, there shall come out of Zion the deliverer, shall turn away from ungodliness from Jacob. That's Isaiah 11. Isaiah does not change his mind from here all the way to chapter 45. Here in chapter 45, verse 17. But Israel shall be saved in the Lord with an everlasting salvation. You shall not be ashamed nor confounded, world without end. Hey, is that not Ephesians chapter 3 and verse 21? World without end, amen? Yes, it is. For this is my covenant unto them when I shall take away their sins. God was going to remove the reproach of the righteous, those who obeyed the gospel. They, not their own righteousness, but the righteousness that came from Christ. And God was going to remove their reproach, just like Joshua was declared to recircumcise, or actually, for the first time, circumcise the folks that had wandered the last years of that 40-year generation in the wilderness wanderings who had not yet been circumcised. The generation that had been circumcised when they came out of Egypt, they all died. Their carcasses fell in the wilderness, as Hebrews 3 tells us. But here are this new generation, the biblical millennials, or Generation X, whatever you want to call them. They're going in to all the baby boomers died. Generation X gets to go into the promised land. Sorry about that, Roy. I realize you're a baby boomer. But nevertheless, they go into the promised land and they receive the inheritance. But they had to have that reproach, Joshua chapter 5, of Egypt removed from them. So Joshua was commanded to circumcise them all over, or circumcise them for the first time. Okay. And that day had God rolled away the reproach of Egypt. Okay. We covered the first four trumpets. I know it was rapid fire. We need to understand this now still has some lingering effects all week from last week, but nevertheless, pollen counts high. That was the first four trumpets. Next week we'll pick up with chapter 9 and the fifth trumpet, and then the sixth trumpet, and then we'll go through uh, several narratives before we get into the seventh trumpet of Revelation chapter 11 and verse 15. But until then, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May he cause his countenance to rise upon you. And may you have a good week. That is my prayer.